When Shavarsh Karapetyan was 15 years old, a group of local gang members beat him, tied him up, and threw him in the pond with a rope tied around his neck, the other end tied to a big rock, and they left him to die. Now, what they didn't know about Shavarsh was that unlike most people in Armenia at that time, Shavarsh could swim. The other thing they didn't know about him was that he was very strong. His father, Vladimir, had enrolled his boys in gymnastics, hoping to get them into sports. The other thing he didn't know was that Shavarsh had a champion's heart. Underwater, he twisted and he writhed and he struggled till he got those ropes off his arms. And then he fought. He fought that rope around his neck and that rock, and he made it to the surface. But he said later, if that rock had been just a little bit heavier, he wouldn't have been able to make it at all, and he wouldn't have gotten out. It was a great impetus for Shavarsh to become a professional swimmer, the way his gymnastics coach had suggested. And he did. Without a trainer, he worked hard as a teenager at developing his technique, getting faster, stronger, and he was doing so well that by the time he was 17, they cut him from the team. The other trainers could see he was going to offer too much competition for their favorites, and they weren't having it. Bitter and angry, Shavarsh went to a local pub to drown his sorrows with a friend named Lipo. Lipo was an older man that Shavarsh had recently met, and Lipo was actually a trainer himself. He trained fin swimmers. Now, a fin swimmer is someone who swims with a huge fins on their feet. At that time, they preferred the monofin, which looks a bit like a dolphin's tail and pulls on up over both the swimmer's feet. When they swim, they move forward powerfully. And in short races, a fin swimmer doesn't take an oxygen tank, he just holds his breath. In the long races, he does take an oxygen tank. Lipo believed Shavarsh had it in him to be a fabulous fin swimmer. And he proved to be right. Shavarsh took 6 gold medals, 10 world records. And not only that, but during one of the heats, when a competitor let all of the air out of his tank, Shavarsh proved again that he had the heart of a champion, and he swam without air for the last 75 meters. He hit the wall, and he passed out in the water. He didn't know he won the race until he woke up in the hospital. Shavarsh was 23 when he went into the visa office to pick up his visa to go to the World Championships and was told that it mysteriously hadn't been renewed. He knew why. He knew once again it was a matter of the trainers wanting someone else to go, and he decided he would make them sorry for their choice. He loaded up his training gear, which consisted of a 45-pound backpack full of sand, and he and his brother Camo, who was also a competitive fin swimmer, decided to go and train. For training, they would take long runs, and they planned to run around Lake Yerevan, which is a man-made lake that is so polluted and full of industrial runoff and human sewage that no one would ever knowingly swim in it. In fact, Shavarsh and Camo had used it before for rowing drills, never to swim. As they were running around the lake, Shavarsh, who was feeling bitter and angry and really needed to work off some negative vibes, had run ahead of his brother. And just as he rounded a corner, he saw a trolleybus, which was carrying over 90 people, smash through the embankment, go down the hill, crash into a concrete barrier, and roll into the lake where it sank. He doesn't even remember stopping to think. He raced after it, threw off his backpack when he reached the shore, stripped down to his skivvies, and hopped right in the water. And he swam out to that bus. Camo came around the corner and saw his brother in the water, and he went in after him. The two brothers swam over to the trolley bus, and they dived down to take a look and see maybe there was a broken window or an open door where they could start rescuing people. They didn't find anything like that. Some of the people had gotten out of the bus before it sank, and those people were swimming for shore, but the people inside the bus were trapped. Shavarsh could see huge bubbles exiting the bus, and he knew that because of the design, there was some air trapped in there. There was a way for the people to breathe, at least for a little while. When they both surfaced, he told Camo to wait there on the surface for him, and he would dive down and retrieve the passengers and pass them up to Camo. Besides, he told Camo, he might need him there to rescue Shavarsh in case something went wrong. Shavarsh dived back down, and bracing himself, he kicked his left leg into that back bus window as hard as he could. He broke a hole in the glass. As he drew his leg back out again, sharp pieces of glass stabbed into the back of his leg and into his calf, but the cold, icy water helped slow the bleeding. And the rubber strip that surrounded the window had become loose. He was able to reach in and pull out the whole thing in one go and toss it aside. And he reached in and started groping for anything that felt human. Shavarsh quickly developed a routine with these dives. He would take 5 deep breaths at the surface, which was the same technique that Lipo had taught him for fin swimming a long time ago. And then he would dive down, reach through that back bus window, grab somebody, swim to the top of the bus, brace his powerful legs on top of that bus, and drive upward so that he could get to the surface as quickly as possible. He wanted to rescue as many people as he could, and he knew he couldn't get them all, but he was going to try. When he got them to the surface, Camo took over, and some people who had seen the accident had come over in canoes and kayaks, and they were taking the people from Camo and ferrying them to the shore. Now, when people later asked Shavarsh what was the most horrifying part of this ordeal, Shavarsh told them that when he realized he was running out of time to save the people, he broke his training. Instead of taking 5 deep breaths at the surface, he took only 1, and he dived to save time. And he reached inside that bus, and he grabbed the first thing he could get hold of because the urge to breathe was just stifling him, and he drove to the surface and shocked his brother by presenting him with a cushion from the bus seat. Shavarsh said later that that bus seat haunted his nightmares. That was a life that could have been saved. Shavarsh and Camo believe that Shavarsh made between 30 and 35 dives, taking someone to the surface every time but one. Some of those people were alive in the boat, some were revived on the bank, and some, sadly, did not survive. After 20 minutes, emergency personnel told Shavarsh and Camo to stop because surely anyone down there was dead by now. Why kill yourself for nothing, they told him. But he wasn't finished working yet. A crane had come, and rescue workers asked Shavarsh to take the cables and tie them to the bus, fasten them to the bus somehow, so that they could drag the trolley bus up out of the water and onto the bank. But there was nothing to tie the cables to. So Shavarsh went up again and got a crowbar, went down and started smashing windows and threading the cables through the windows, and then he handed the cables to Camo, who got in a kayak and brought them to shore. And the trolley bus was pulled out of the water. Inside were about 40 people who hadn't survived. The total death toll came to 46. And officials put in their records that Shavarsh and Camo had saved 20, but they believe that it was actually a lot more, because they said some people, when they reached the bank, had just left. They hadn't stuck around for medical attention. Shavarsh swam to shore and stood there with his brother and his father Vladimir, who had arrived when he heard that a bus had gone into the lake and knew his sons were training over there, and he was worried his sons had taken the bus home. Now, Vladimir's not that demonstrative of a guy, but he took off his shirt and he wrapped it around his son's left leg, which was bleeding pretty well at the time, and he said, "You've done everything you can do here." And he took his boys home. That night, they called the family physician to come and take a look at Shavarsh, because he had begun running a very high fever. He was seizing, he was delirious, and the doctor diagnosed him with blood poisoning from the deadly lake water and double pneumonia. He was put into the hospital, where he spent several weeks. And when he got out of the hospital and went back to training, his body was not the same. He would cough up lots of mucus and phlegm all the time. He couldn't not. And it would get stuck in his breathing apparatus. It would make a mess of everything he was trying to do. And worst of all, he had developed a severe hatred and aversion for the water. He wasn't afraid of it, but he hated it, and he didn't want to be anywhere near it. Getting into the pool and training was about as much fun as jumping in a pool full of razor blades. But such was Shavarsh's heart and spirit that he did it anyway. Day after day, month after month, he dived back in that pool and he trained. Coughing, choking, he trained. And when the world championship came up again, Shavarsh was there with his brother Camo. And he was swimming. In the third race, he swam, and he swam with everything he had. He said he swam to the death. He had never swum so angry or so determined before. He swam so hard, in spite of his new handicaps, that he broke an 11th world record, and also didn't have the strength to get out of the pool on his own. His brother jumped in and saved him and pulled him out. Shavarsh wasn't interested in talking about what happened, and neither was the Soviet media. Their official position was, trolleybuses do not fall in the water. We're not going to discuss it. We're not going to report it. They did say that it was very sad a trolleybus had crashed and offered condolences in 3 very small articles in the paper. Only a few people knew what Shavarsh and Camo had done. Most of the people who'd been rescued didn't even know who did it, until someone from a major paper in Moscow learned of the story, tracked it down, and the officials released the records to him. And he wrote about Shavarsh's rescue, although he only mentioned the 20 people who'd been saved and not those who had died. Shavarsh didn't even tell his wife what he had done, and when asked later by a reporter, snapped at her a little bit and said, What was there to say? Why should I talk about it? I'd already made a name for myself another way. But Shavarsh does believe. He said that there's an unseen force that guides our actions. Later, people said that the only person who could have accomplished this rescue was Shavarsh. And what were the odds? He said that the strongest, fastest swimmer in the world would be training at Yerevan Lake when he was supposed to be at the World Championships, just in time to see that trolley bus go into the water and save those people. Shavarsh is a true hero. And I think one of the most amazing things about him is that after the rescue and after developing that terrible aversion to water, which sounds a lot like post-traumatic stress disorder, he still went on to win another world record and bring home some medals that season. It was his last season, but he still did it. In 2014, he was given the opportunity to carry the Olympic torch, which he did. And when it went out, he bummed a light from a security guard and just kept on going. Something that small is not going to stop a man with a heart like that. People, no matter what life does to them, no matter what happens, they just keep going. People like Shavarsh and people like you.